I'm very pleased to get to be with y'all today, and I've got friends in the room. It's interesting to hear in the introduction. I am a writer. In fact, just last night, knowing I was going to speak here reminded me to sit down and start mapping out my trip to Sturgis this year. This will be my fourth year in a row to go to Sturgis. I've ridden it up and back 2 of those 3 years. The first year I went, the intent was to ride up, but we had special session after special session after special session, and it screwed it up. So I went to, there was another senator, Senator Kel Seliger, who used to ride. He's quit riding, but he was going to trailer, he and a bunch of buddies from Amarillo were going to trailer their bikes up and go up there, and I was going to ride and meet them up there. But the session screwed us up, so I rode to Amarillo on a weekend, put my bike on his trailer, they trailered it up, and we flew up. And so then I decided to ride back, and I rode all the way back, and I had bought, if you've been to Sturgis, you can buy those patches for your cut that says, I rode mine, and it has the year. Well, I rode all the way back, and I had bought one of those, and Liz meets me at the back door, and she says, and I pulled that patch out, and she said, but you didn't. And I said, well, baby, let me just tell you what you just did. And she said, what? And I said, you guaranteed I'm riding that damn thing up there next year. So when you see, if you ever see me wearing my cut, you'll see I rode mine, and it only for 2 years, because I'm being honest about that third one. But I explained to her, I said, Liz, there are people that don't live within 300 miles of that damn place that have all those for every year. I ride it 500 miles to Amarillo, and then I ride it all the way back, and I don't get credit from you. So, but motorcycles and spouses, sometimes there's always something going on there. In fact, the truth of the matter is, I became a serious rider only about 5 years ago. And the reason was, Liz and I will be married next month, June. Liz and I have been married 37 years. So it's right at 6 years I've been riding, because somehow I won a 31-year argument. And to this good day, I don't know how I won that argument, but I won it, and I'm guessing that there is a life expectancy, a life insurance policy somewhere out there that I don't know about. Some evidence of that existence is probably when she said to me, okay, you can buy a motorcycle, but you can't wear a helmet. She never really said that. She doesn't like me saying she said that. But anyway, bottom line is, so about 5 years ago, I bought my first motorcycle as an adult. As a kid in high school, I had a little Honda 50 that had been handed down to me by my cousin, who was 3 years older than me. It was it was horrible. But now I've got, you can always tell how well I think the legislative session went. If I have a new motorcycle, you can tell I think it went badly. Because when I come out of the sessions, I end up with a new motorcycle if I'm pissed off. So the bottom line is, you guys know, you know more than I do, but I ride a lot. I ride with some of the folks I see here in the room, and I care deeply about making sure that we're safe and making sure that we do the kinds of things at the legislature to allow motorcyclists to be safe on the road. I love the patch, loud pipes save lives. I have pipes where, again, Liz and I had a discussion where I went up to her and I said, I need new pipes. On my Heritage Softail Classic, I said, I need new pipes. She said, why do you need new pipes? And I said, well, it makes it safer. She said, it makes it safer. And I said, well, first of all, people can hear me. And she says, right. And I said, plus it adds to the torque, and so it makes it faster. I can get out of people's way. She said, I think both those reasons are bullshit. And I said, okay, how about at Father's Day? She said, okay, Father's Day, you get new pipes. But a lot of us learn the hard way. That senator I just told you about that I used to ride with from Amarillo, the reason he quit riding is because, unfortunately, he walked up to me on the Senate floor on a Wednesday one day, and he said, I'm going to bring my bike down to Austin, because I host a legislative ride every legislative session. I put together the ride, and we do it out of Cowboy Harley Davidson. And he wanted to bring his bike down, so he didn't have to. He had rented the bike the session before. He wanted to have his bike down. He lives up in Amarillo. I said, well, I'll meet you in Abilene on Saturday. So I ride up to Abilene, and he meets me there. We go out to have barbecue, and we go back to the hotel on the south side of Abilene. Actually, hotel's a little fancy word for it. We get up the next morning. We have a glorious ride from Abilene to Austin. And when I get to Mopac, I split off, and he has to go get he wants to go get his car, which was at the airport because he had flown home. He leaves his bike there. He goes to his apartment in town. He stops and buys groceries, goes to his apartment, puts all the groceries up, and then he gets Uber. He could do that back then. He gets Uber, and he goes back to the airport and gets on his bike, and coming back, a taxi cab pulls in front of him and just busts him up something horrible. So he's quit riding. And that was something that really was not his, well, not really, it was not his fault at all. It was somebody not paying attention, and he was hurt. And of course, we've all been in situations where we're scared. I think there's probably some of us in the room that may not admit that they've been in situations. My most frightened was when I travel now on any sort of business. If I can build in an extra day, I do, and I rent a bike. So if I go to recently, I was in California on business, and I rented a bike. The other guys, the folks I was with, they wanted to play golf. Well, I could give a damn about going out and hitting a golf ball. So I got on a bike and went through the Mojave Desert. It was great, by the way. I do that all the time. 2 years ago, I had to go to London, and it was in March, London, England. I go to the internet, and I find the Chelsea and Fulham Hog chapter in London, England. And I sent an email that says, hey, I'm a guy from Texas. I'm going to be over in London. Do y'all have any rides? And it wasn't 30 minutes, and this guy writes back, and he says, great that you're going to be in London, but this is March in London. We don't have no rides in March in London. But because you're coming, they put together a really cool 2 days worth of rides. But they ride on the wrong side of the road. And I got to tell you, talk about fear. Every time it is a natural instinct if you're riding on a motorcycle that if you see something coming at you from the right, it scares you because that's not where it's supposed to be coming from. And so just every time I get a little bit comfortable, someone would come up and scare me. I spent 2.5 days, because we had to get up on Monday morning and get me back to where I needed to be, 2.5 days riding just like this. This is the perfect description of my ride. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. So, and of course these guys are making fun of me because I don't want to filter, lane split, because I've never done it. So on Monday morning, he meets me at 6:30 in the morning. We got to get back to London, and he says the only way we're going to make it back in time is if we filter. And I said, man, Nick, I'm not sure I can do that. He said, no, you can do that. Well, they do it at 40 and 50 miles an hour. And in fact, there was one point I was behind him, we were splitting those lanes, and he pulls back over into traffic. And I thought, now why is he doing that? Well, the reason is because me chugging along, we had probably 15 Kawasaki's behind me, trying to get past. But I got to tell you, you want to talk about mobility in this state? And some I know don't agree with me on this, but I filed legislation so that we could do some lane splitting. Now, the way my bill would do it, wouldn't be that you could, go running up somebody at 40 miles an hour. It was that the traffic basically had to be moving at less than 20 miles an hour, and you couldn't be moving more than, I can't remember what the bill ended up being, I had to negotiate, but it was like 20, 25 miles an hour. I don't remember. Huh? There you go. And so now we didn't get anywhere with it. But I got to tell you, folks, I think it's the legislation that we ought to look at. We got to do it in a way where it's as safe as you can make it. But there's just no reason to be sitting on a motorcycle in that traffic when you could be, it increases mobility. And I don't know how many of you are from Austin, Texas, and here from Austin, but we ought to be using every tool we've got available to us to enhance mobility. And frankly, I think we can do it where it is actually safer for people on motorcycles if they're moving as opposed to sitting in that damned old traffic. Now, I will tell you, the only time I have lane split in Austin, Texas, is coming out of a Rot Rally parade one night, and I was on Riverside, and there was no way to get out, and it worked beautifully. Now, a couple people honked at me, and I'm sure they didn't realize that they were honking at their state senator who was wearing that on that motorcycle. But so be it. They don't know who they don't know not to vote for me because I did that. So that works out just fine. So let's talk a little bit about legislation and how things have played out. I know you've had a little bit of some discussion about what happened during the last legislative session. But what I want you all to understand is that you have some folks that are ready to advocate for you, and you have some folks that do go to the Capitol and advocate on your behalf and do a good job of making sure people know what's going on. But it's not easy because most folks don't ride motorcycles, and most folks don't have an empathy with that. And frankly, most folks have some bias about riding on a motorcycle. The amount of interest I generate when people realize there's a state representative from Eagle Pass named Poncho Nevadas, and Poncho rides, and he and I were supposed to speak on a legislative panel in Nacogdoches, same panel. So I called him and said, "Why don't we ride?" Because I'll whatever the excuse is, I'll ride, right? And so he came up to Austin and we rode together. My guess is it's the first ever legislative panel in Nacogdoches, Texas, where people were wearing leathers, and by the way, we dolled it up a little bit. We made sure we were in chaps the whole bit when we walked in to give our speeches. So, but the point is, most folks don't understand it and don't have an empathy for it. So what that means is, in a legislative setting, it requires us to do more in order to be advocates on behalf of positions. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just that much of what happens in the Texas legislature is about life experiences, right? Somebody can relate to something. So we just need to work a little bit harder on some of these. But let me give you an example of where it has not worked as well as maybe we would like, and that is funding for motorcycle safety programs. The Transportation Code for the state of Texas instructs the Department of Public Safety to administer a motorcycle safety program. Great. That sounds on its face, wow. Everybody's for that, right? By statute, the program is required to provide safety training courses and materials for motorcyclists. We all know about that. And public information to the broad general public on sharing roadways with motorcycles. The code also provides that $5 from every motorcycle license application and renewal fee, so you all pay that, right? We all pay that. $5 from every one of those shall be deposited in the motorcycle safety account. Well, we're going to go home, right? We won. It ain't a competition, but we won. And here's the thing. It's called a general revenue dedicated account. It's dedicated, the fee that they're collecting from you is a fee that is dedicated to a motorcycle safety program that is supposed to do those two things I talked about. The problem with that is that even though the code states that money can only be used to defray the cost of the program The legislature stopped appropriating funds from that account after the 2005 legislative session. So as a result of that, DPS's spending on the motorcycle safety program was really decreasing significantly after that session. Now, as long as I've been in the legislature, I've had what I call my honesty agenda. Because you would be shocked, maybe you wouldn't be. Probably you shouldn't be. How much money is raised in fees and taxes that is supposed to go to a specific program? And here's the way that works, right? Here's the good politics. Nobody's for increased fees or taxes. No new taxes, no new fees. Oh, but hang on a second. Do you like parks? Well, yeah, I like parks. Well, what would you say if we put a little bit of a tax on sporting goods, when people buy sporting goods, and we'll dedicate that to Parks and Wildlife Department? Oh, well, I'm for that. Well, how do you feel about old people in the summer when it's so hot they can't run their air conditioners because they can't afford to do that? People on fixed incomes and senior citizens. Oh, we ought to help them. Well, what if we put a little bit of a fee on utility bills that would be dedicated to that? Well, I'm for that. Well, that's good politics, right? Then what happens is they collect all that money and the budget writers don't allocate it to its specific purpose. The other example, of course, the elephant in the room is, hey, would you all be in favor when you get your license or renew your motorcycle license, paying $5 that would go to a motorcycle safety program? Well, yeah, I'd be for that. Of course I would be. $5, sure. Okay, and it happens. But then what happens is it doesn't go to that program. I just told you that. So I've been screaming since I got in the legislature that we needed to have an honesty agenda and stop that stuff. Now, I will tell you that it's not just a little bit of money. I brought this because I wanted to make sure I give you the exact numbers. At the end of the 2012 and 13 legislative session, the number of the balance in general revenue dedicated funds that wasn't being spent for their intended purpose was $4.9 billion. $4.9 billion. Now, here's the thing. I've been screaming about this since I got into the legislature, and guys, I'm winning. Last session, we got it down to $3.5 billion. My ego being what it is, that's a W, right? You know, that's a win. But here's the thing. $16.5 million of fees collected from you for a motorcycle safety program is being held in an account and not being used for that motorcycle safety program. So that's bad by itself, right? That's not keeping government's promise. But it's even worse, in my view, when there's a specific purpose that is meant to save lives. And what that motorcycle safety program is it's meant to save lives. And here's the troubling thing. At the same time that money wasn't being allocated to the motorcycle safety program, we were seeing an increase in Texas motorcycle fatalities. TxDOT reported that 495 motorcycle fatalities occurred in Texas in 2013, which was a 5% increase from 2012. And I just told you what the numbers were. They weren't allocating money for their very own motorcycle safety program. So I've told you how much money was already in that. And by the way, keep in mind, when I give you that amount of money, it's actually growing, right? Because if they're collecting the fees and they're not spending it, that fund grows. And the reason they do that is because it helps them certify the budget. Now, the good news is, because of a lot of hard work by some people in this room and others, this session, this immediate past session, the one we had last year, the legislature appropriated approximately $4.1 million from general revenue dedicated funds, leaving, by the way, that $16.5 million I'm telling you about that's still in there for certification. But The key to that is $4.1 million. If you do the math on that, rough math, what that means is DPS's, and we were just talking about it as I walked in, the annual budget for the motorcycle safety program went up from money that was just kind of being just there and being used from about $400,000 to 2.8 roughly in numbers. Now, I was the one that filed the bills and fought for that. I'm on the Senate Finance Committee, and we had one day where I made a big deal about all this. I wore everybody out. But they needed to hear it. They needed to hear, first, you're not doing right just by the taxpayer and the fee payer. That's wrong, to make a promise and then break the promise. But particularly when what happens is it results in fatalities, and we know fatalities are on the way up. I filed a bill that was called Senate Bill 754. And as I filed it, of course, things change. And so I'm being very careful when I say as filed. Senate Bill 754 did four things. The first thing it did, which was a little controversial among my friends in the motorcycle community, but the first thing it did is it raised the motorcycle and moped registration fee by an additional $3. Now, I'll get to why I did that in just a second. Well, I'll just tell you right now. I was going to let them keep their damn $5, right? I felt like in order to get the motorcycle safety program funded, let's just raise it some so that they can keep that money for whatever. To some degree, I was saying, just do it. Give us the additional money. I was going to raise it by $3. It would have sent the revenue that would be generated to a sub-account, a different account, but related to the already existing general revenue dedicated account. And it would have specified, the third thing is, it would have made very clear and specified that at the very least, the $3 sub-account funds would be spent on the motorcycle safety program. The fourth thing it did is it would have allowed TxDOT to use general revenue from that fund to fund its Share the Road campaign. In other words, it would have provided more money for DPS than it has, and it would have allowed TxDOT to use it for the Share the Ride program. Now, I got to tell you, quickly, that additional fee went out the door. Because remember I told you about the politics. No new fees. Even if we're lying about how it's going to get used, no new fees. So what happened is that fee increase was opposed, and I had to drop that out. I wouldn't have been able to get a hearing in committee without that. I'll just tell you that. We got a hearing. So the final version of Senate Bill 754, which became effective, we passed it. It became effective on September 1 of 2015. It allows TxDOT it has those things that I talked about except for the new fee. It allows TxDOT to use the general revenue dedicated fund to fund the program, but the problem is the money didn't get appropriated to it. So we accomplished quite a bit, and we set the groundwork for it. And I think that's going to make a difference, folks. I think we're going to make a difference. I was going to say one other thing about the funding of this. Another example of some of the work that we accomplished, again, with some of the people that are in this room, is the continued existence of that general revenue dedicated account. So as I'm working over on the Senate side to get money in it and get the money appropriated, over on the House side, there was a point during the session that House Bill 7 over on the House side would have abolished that motorcycle safety account. It would have just done away with it completely. And what it would have done is it would have transferred all the money that you've paid for your motorcycle safety program into a general revenue fund. Well, I worked with several members pretty hard to change HB 7, and as a result, that GRD continues to exist. So moving forward, we've got a couple things. One is we've now made the case that you need to be using that general revenue dedicated money for its intended purpose. We didn't get all the money in it, but we made that case. Second, we got into the bill that we can now use some of that money for TxDOT as part of its Share the Road program. So that's two good things. Third, we've made it where people recognize as part of the honesty agenda that this money ought to go for that purpose. Now, by the way, TxDOT is doing a share of the road program, but they do that primarily out of, well, not primarily, they do it, I guess it's exclusively out of a grant, from a federal fund grant, that's about $500,000. So we can get more money, and that's what we need to do. Now, I will tell you, I'm going to continue to monitor and do whatever we need to do to get us where we need to get. But here's my call to action. My call to action to y'all has two parts to it. One is, what else could we do? What else could we do to make motorcycle safety, enhance motorcycle safety? Something I should have mentioned. Another bill that I passed was a bill that allows for lighting on motorcycles for nighttime. People came to me. Frankly, that had not occurred to me. So that's why I'm making this a part of a call to action. What public safety folks were saying is the part of the problem in making it where it was clear on what you could do with lighting, and we made it clear what you can do and the color of the lighting, is that sometimes people were putting blues and reds and that kind of thing, and folks in public safety were concerned that was sending the wrong message, that what that was people would think that's a police or peace officer motorcycle or something of that nature. But we wanted to make that where people could be more safe at night when they were riding. Well, that's a great example of something that, even though I ride and care deeply about this, I may not have thought of. So my first call to action is, what else can we do? What else are you seeing or you've experienced in your life that if we changed the law or did something would make it safer for you and your loved ones to be on those motorcycles? Help me come up with that list. Help me know what that is. The second thing is, continue to watch how that money's spent. Continue to watch how that money's spent. And when we get into the legislative session, if people call on you to come down and be a part of what's going on at the state capitol, you may not even testify. You may just be standing in the back of a room. But people can point out, you see, these are real folks that care about this. I'll tell you, one of the best pieces of legislation, or maybe easiest piece of legislation I ever passed, was I had met a couple of folks that wanted to ride, that had reached a point for whatever reason, including a lost limb, that could ride trikes. But they were having to be tested on two-wheelers. So we passed legislation, 2 sessions ago? Yeah, 2 sessions ago, that it made it where you could have a separate test on a three-wheeler so that you could ride. Well, that was great legislation, but let me tell you, it was that went pretty smooth when you looked at the back of the room and you saw the people in the back of the room, that it would have made a difference in their ability to ride. So we were able to pass that. So we need to keep on it, I guess is what I'm saying. We need to have folks down there that are willing to testify and be a part of this. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions because we've got a few minutes for questions. I tried to speed through that so that I'd provide a little bit of time. But let me stop with this last comment. I don't care if you live in Senate District 14. Senate District 14 is my Senate district, and it's about 75 to 80% of Travis County and 100% of Bastrop County. I don't care whether you live in my Senate district and can vote for me. I'm your state senator. I am your state senator when it comes to these issues, and you should call on me and let me know how I'd be a better state senator for the people that love being out on those motorcycles and enjoy the family time, enjoy the freedom of it, and frankly, use it as a way to get around to their jobs and live their lives. People don't understand that enough. I think I do, and I want to help you in that regard.